Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Zac Celedonia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and looky, who's here? In an undisclosed location. Like, everything's changed. One, Zac Celedonia. It's been a minute, my friend. How you doing?
Great. How am I doing? Yeah, I'm doing fantastic, man. We got the playoffs in the upcoming horizon here.
Yeah. Hey, playoffs. We were just saying this offline. I think it bears just bringing out immediately. You were saying it was Happy Gilmore, right? It's the Adam Sandler deal with he's like, I don't know who posted it. It's out there on social media, and he's screaming at his girlfriend, and it's like, just leave. No, I didn't mean it. And it was
go. Who needs you? Who cares? I'm just kidding, baby. I'm so sorry. You know you're my world.
And that was like the tagline of that was like Steelers fans with Mike Tomlin. And it's so true, man. So I got to give you all the credit in the world because you just said something right before we were on, and I was like, this is why we try not to talk before we start recording, because then we forget the things we were going to talk about, and it gets all jumbled and disorganized. But man, Mike Tomlin and consistency. I had a memory on my I'm going to pull this up. It was on Facebook from last year, and it said there was only one game that Mike Tomlin's ever coached where the Steelers were actually eliminated while playing that game. They were already eliminated from playoff contention. One game. And how many has he coached so far? Let me find this. It's hard to believe. In a regular season, he has coached 275 games. And there was only one game where the Steelers have ever been just out of it. That game didn't mean anything. So I understand there's like the memes are floating around that's like, oh, well, he's only won this many playoff games, or they needed help like 8 times out of 15 years or whatever. Well, look how many times they made the playoffs in all of those various seasons. How many times they've won the division? 5 times. And not only that, they're in a division. This isn't like the New England Patriots who are ready to get rid of Bill Belichick now, because guess what? The Bills and the Dolphins have caught up. Those teams were perpetually bad. This isn't like you were in, let's say, the NFC North, where the Packers should, with like Detroit Lions teams that are bad, Bears teams that are bad. It should just like always be like a shoe-in to win their division, get in the postseason, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about Baltimore Ravens, who won a Super Bowl about 10 years ago, that are always in contention. They've got an MVP level quarterback. You've got the same in Cincinnati when Joe Burrow wasn't hurt. They were just in 2 AFC championship games, basically. They were just in a Super Bowl recently. And this is what the Steelers have to contend with. So for all the people who like to go around and toss around the term mediocre Mike, this is a hell of a job this season to get into the postseason. I know he limped in with some help. There's some things, but if you face the opponents, you face what's put in front of you. He's done it with 3 different quarterbacks, about 15 safeties and inside linebackers. So it's pretty incredible looking at it. And like you said, it's not a fluke.
Yeah, for sure. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, like most things are in sports, and you don't want to let yourself get complacent. You don't want to accept mediocrity, which is the term that gets associated with Tomlin so often. But there is something too when you hear other fan bases talk about how lucky Steeler fans really are. And I think if you are trying to give an honest evaluation of the job Mike Tomlin does year in and year out, the truth is somewhere in the middle between like he's a phenomenal coach and they're accepting complacency argument. I personally, for the longest time, have always been extremely appreciative. And I've said every year, I'm so thankful to be a fan of a team that every single year, every single game counts for something. Like you just highlighted, there's been one game in 275 games that means nothing to Steeler fans. The games always mean something. And do you want more? Obviously, you want more. You want a Super Bowl every single year. But I think Tomlin's been so consistent for so long, the waters have kind of been muddied over time of like people using it as a negative thing that we never have a losing season, that we're always in playoff contention. Like, yeah, you want more, but you should appreciate those things, especially this year. I've never been closer to that side of, maybe Tomlin should move on. I was using the stale word. Everybody loves talking about stale. It's stale. Andy Reid's a name that gets thrown around a lot because Andy Reid left the Philadelphia Eagles as a rather successful coach and went on to find success with the Chiefs because things just ran stale in Philadelphia. I get all of that. But this year, when you were so close to actually being a bad team and actually being out of it, I mean, the Steelers were left for dead 4 or 5 weeks ago when Kenny Pickett went down and Mitch took over. Nobody saw us making it to this point, except Mike Tomlin probably. And a couple of things bounced his way. That's how football goes. The ball bounces your way. You get a couple lucky breaks, a couple lucky calls. But when you do it this consistently and this often, year in and year out, it goes from luck to skill. I don't think Tomlin planned this year to go exactly as it did. It didn't go to a T how he wanted it to go. But the end result, where you find yourself now, is a place where only the upper echelon of the NFL gets to be, and that's the playoffs. And if you get in the dance, you get a chance. And in years past, when we had the corpse of Big Ben playing quarterback, there was something different about getting into the playoffs those years where you didn't feel as inspired. You felt good about checking that box of getting to the dance. But this year, something about the way the team finished and the way the offense finished, the way that Mason Rudolph is throwing the ball and commanding the offense, the way the defense has come together in spite of all of the injuries, it just feels different this year. And I think this could be the season that Tomlin gets that monkey off his back where he'll be able to check off a playoff win, possibly do more. But I'm only speaking for myself when I say this, of course, but I haven't felt this good about a playoff team, Steelers team, since we hosted the Jaguars back when we still had Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown.
Yeah, dude. Definitely. That season still sticks in my craw. I was like, they finally had the killer bees. They finally had Martavis Bryant in a playoff game, and then it fell off from there. And a lot of people got to this mediocre, not winning playoffs, didn't win with the killer bees. That thing, like, that drives me crazy, like, to no end, because they only had Bell 2016. That was the first time he was actually in the postseason. He got hurt. They had to play like Ben Tate. They had to play D'Angelo Williams. D'Angelo Williams gets hurt, and they were still winning games, but it was like a wild card game, a divisional game. I remember going up to the Broncos and Fitz Toussaint fumbles, and just absolutely that was a killer, And
one of the worst moments of my life.
Yeah, and they say, well, he had all this talent. Well, he didn't have it on the field. And unfortunately, you're heading into that same direction right now into the postseason. People are going to try and remember, oh, he had all of this talent. Well, let's look at throughout the year. I mean, this goes to, we're finally doing a post-game show for the first time in like a month because of all the holidays and everything like that. So let's not be remiss that the Steelers had to get business done. They win I'd say a sloppy game, an ugly game. It's 17-10. But it's the conditions that made it ugly. And I think the conditions, regardless if it would have been all of the Ravens starters out there or not, would have definitely had a factor in this. And then when you have like that kind of miserable weather and there's still people that were holding things against Mason. We'll talk about Mason a little bit. A fumble here or whatever. Did they notice like the first drive? Like literally, like if you were paying attention to this game, you're watching the same game I am. They went from like doing like the little halfback pitch toss to like literally like putting it right in the dude's chest in both hands. Like there were 4 hands on the football at the exchange, and it was like this delayed, like everything. And it was delayed too because the field was like just like an ice skating rink. You could see like both sides of the line are trying to like set, and everything was just like this pause delay as you're watching through this blurred screen. It's a mess because of like all the rain, just miserable conditions. And
but I had 3 heart attacks on the first drive because you had Najee fumble the snap or the handoff. You had Jalen Warren drop that toss, and Mason Rudolph almost threw a pick. It went right through the guy's hands.
Yeah.
So on the first drive alone, there were 3 almost turnovers, 3 heart attacks for your boy.
And that's the only bad throw that Mason's had even in these conditions over the last 3 games. Mike Tomlin, there'll be a lot of criticism about not playing Mason sooner, but I mean, just look at the job that he's done with what he's had to do. This Ravens game, even though the Ravens were playing their backups, they were playing Steelers backups. Mason's quarterback, QB3, okay? On defense, and this is tragic that they lose TJ Watt during this game, and looks like he will not be available for a week or 2 at best if he could heal up fast enough. I know he's going to want to be out there, put a prosthetic leg on him, whatever be the case. It's a huge, huge deal that we'll talk about when we look ahead to the Buffalo Bills, but TJ wasn't out there for full participation. Minkah Fitzpatrick has been out there. They lost Keanu Neal as a starting strong safety earlier in the year. DeMonte Casey takes his spot and is suspended. Trenton Thompson is like a fill-in there, and then he was hurt too, and Elijah Riley got hurt too, and it's like they're throwing Eric Rowe out there like off the streets. You're moving Patrick Peterson to a position he's never played before, which I think they might find a new calling for. In fact, both of those guys deserve some hats off attention, I think, because as you do move to Buffalo and you get Casey back off of the suspension, you get Minkah Fitzpatrick back healthy, and then you still have Peterson and you still have Death Row. I'm gonna like leaning towards he used to start Eric Rowe next to Minkah Fitzpatrick and then have KZ revert back to his third safety role, or Patrick Peterson play like a big slot, maybe some corner duty splitting with Levi Wallace. That's going to be huge for the Steelers going forward. But let's not pretend like the Ravens. There's Michael Walker, Miles Jack off the couch. Landon Roberts was like, like on one wheel out of like 4. So he's been hurt. So I don't want to like everybody be like, oh, well, they beat the Ravens and they snuck in because they're playing a bunch of, they play what's in front of them. And they beat that Ravens team before. In fact, if it wasn't for Matt Canada in his last game as OC not being able to get like 15 yards for a Chris Boswell try in Cleveland, they would have ran the table here 6-0 in the AFC North, which is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, that shouldn't be belittled. The division record is huge. And I went on a tangent earlier there about how I feel better about this team in the playoffs than I have Steelers teams in the past being in the playoffs. I will say, obviously, losing TJ Watt kind of puts a damper on that feeling. Definitely, I don't want to say it ruined the playoff seeding for me, or it made me feel less good about the win, but it is in the back of your mind. It's obviously a huge loss. The Steelers do have the best edge depth they've had probably throughout TJ Watt's entire career. Nick Herbig making plays all season long. Marcus Golden's no slouch. So I think for a game or 2, they could get by. But when you're losing your best player, that's a huge, huge loss. And when it's someone of TJ Watt's caliber, the only player to lead the NFL in sacks for 3 different seasons ever, it's a huge loss. But you want to think that they'll be able to overcome, because this season in particular, we've grown accustomed to it. I feel like we've seen plenty of seasons where we've lost our starting middle backers or starting safeties, and the defense has just gone to complete shit. But this year, through luck and through scouting and who knows what else, they've been able to stumble upon not 1, not 2, but a bunch of guys who've come in off the couch and performed very well for the Steelers. Miles Jack, this version of Miles Jack is better than the first one we got.
Yeah.
And Michael Walker's been playing really good, all things considered. He hasn't been perfect, but he's been good. Eric Rowe's been incredible. Eric Rowe, he's the guy that went under the radar to me as they were filtering these guys in and out, these free agents and these practice squad guys. He's one of the ones that kind of snuck by that I more or less forgot about. I remember having a conversation with a friend before the Bengals game, and they were asking me who was starting at safety, and I was like, for the life of me, I can't remember who was starting because I just totally forgot about Eric Rowe. But he's been great, and he's been a journeyman, Dolphins, Patriots. But when you look at his career, his most successful and longest stint anywhere was with the Patriots. So I know they're terrible right now, but when he was there, they were still winning Super Bowls. And that tells me that he did enough to impress one of the hardest guys to impress, Bill Belichick, and played a major role for those Patriot teams. He's a very heads-up player. He's got good ball skills. He seems to be in position a lot to make plays on the football over these past few games. He's been great. Trenton Thompson was great before he got hurt. So you can't blame fans like you and I for having belief and having hope in this team and possibly winning a playoff game without TJ Watt because they've already lost like more or less 3, 4, 5 starters on defense and they haven't missed a beat.
Totally. I totally agree with you. And like, last year in Miami, Eric Rowe wasn't looking, specifically too hot. During the course of the season, 42 solo tackles for combined 56, 4 tackles for loss. He got to the quarterback twice. And and that's over the course of like he's playing like 59, 29, 64, 10, 21, 23. Okay, so then he was inactive 77, 75, 90, 95, 66%, 80, 87, 57. That's a lot of snaps. We're talking 50-ish, 60-ish snaps per game, at least for the second half of his season last year. He's already like almost there. He's got 22 solo tackles in 3 games with the Steelers. He's got about, let's bring up.
I like how you call him Death Row too. I like that. That's
who got that? I think Nick Faribaugh was the one that got that. Someone got the question, and then Cam Hayward said, "I don't understand how this dude isn't on a team. Like, how can he not be signed?" And Steelers just get lucky. So here's the bats with Joe. 22 solo tackles, so he's already 20 off of what last year's were, and he has a tackle for loss, and of course he has a turnover too. That's some I would start looking at this guy for, he's 31. It's like it's not the youngest age, but Devontae Casey's in that same group. I mean, obviously Patrick Peterson's a little older, but usually the safeties, they're playing off ball, they're a little. I think they could get away. This guy might have a little left in the tank. When did Weddle play until 33? I think something like that.
That sounds right. And you got that call off the couch to play for the Rams in the Super Bowl too. So I don't know how old he was. I don't know how old he was when they called him to do that.
I'm pulling it up right now. He was 36 when he did that 2 years ago. I know, right? So he played to 34. He was off an entire year. He didn't play in 2020, the COVID year. Did not play for anyone. I know, isn't that wild? So, you know what else is wild? Some other math that I want to do real quick. TJ, you mentioned TJ Watt. Yes, he's a game record. I do feel a lot better about potential depth with Golden and Herbig. Herbig's a dude. When he came into the game against Seattle, I was just like, look out. And there it was. And he's got that same like potential, at least where Golden is a veteran player. I think they match up well with Buffalo. Like Kansas City, I'd be like, I mean, I understand both quarterbacks are excellent, but you talk about the run game for Buffalo. They really tried to lean on that. They're trying to get that going because it usually isn't working for them. I think Joey Porter Jr. can match up against Stephon Diggs. And then if you got the bodies that we were just talking about in the secondary, like Minka, Rowe, KZ, Peterson, these guys would match up good with guys like Knox and Kincaid. So I feel better about that than trying to shut down Travis Kelce. So there was still some weirdo way that if that game ended in a tie with the way, because it kept saying Buffalo or Miami or Pittsburgh and then at Kansas City I was like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. And all the out there that were bitching about Peacock and it being an exclusive game, you don't have to worry about that now. So you don't have to pony up an extra $5 if you don't live in Pittsburgh to watch a game that's, people that get on that is just like, do you not pay to have ESPN? Like, do you not pay to have Amazon Prime? Or you at least go to the bar? You go to the bar and spend money on wings. You're probably spending more on a beer and wings than getting Peacock. So anyways, that's my soapbox. Let's talk about.
I get it. People just hate change, man. People hate to adjust and evolve. And I get it as much as anybody. I don't like change either, but this has been going on in the NFL for years. So it's funny because when they announced that there was going to be a Peacock exclusive game, my mind immediately went to like all the older Yinzers in the area, like freaking out. And like
your dad.
It probably went from going to bed to watching the game last night because we were already in the playoffs, but the focus shifted from the Steelers being in the playoffs to the Steelers not being on Peacock.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know. I didn't want the Saturday game. That gives them a little. I know they're gonna have to travel. It gives them a little bit more time for any questionable guys that need to heal up. I was like, so this is good as a 7th seed to not have to play a Saturday night game in 0-degree weather in Kansas City, which been there, done that.
Yeah, I'm pretty scarred from the last Kansas City game. I mean, we had that really, really fun first quarter when
Yeah.
TJ Watt scored the first touchdown. But I talked about this in group chats with my friends and with my dad and other people, and I waffled back and forth throughout the day after the Titans won for us. Which, how about Terrell Edmonds, by the way? Terrell Edmonds having a big day for the Steelers.
Yeah, big day. Bring him back, too.
We always knew he was good. And, I waffled back and forth all day. My instinct actually at first thought was I'd rather play the Chiefs because they just haven't been the same Chiefs team all year. I feel like everybody as an NFL fan base collectively was waiting on that shoe to drop. We were all waiting for the Chiefs to look like the Chiefs again, and they just haven't all year long. Travis Kelce looks old. Patrick Mahomes looks frustrated. Their defense is pretty solid, and they still got Andy Reid. So there's always that chance they can recapture that magic, but they were my first choice. But as the day went on, I thought more and more about it, and I thought more and more about the Chiefs already kind of having that mental edge over us after beating us in the playoffs before. The Chiefs, Arrowhead, you don't want to play in the Bills Stadium either, but Arrowhead is one of the toughest places to play. Not that Bills Mafia is going to make it very easy on Steeler fans, but you also have Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen, as we saw versus the Dolphins, he's almost a shoo-in to toss you one or two on defense. Might get more. He threw the Dolphins 2 red zone picks last night. And that one touchdown, I'm sorry if people aren't following this right now, but the one touchdown the Bills scored last night should have been a 3rd interception for Josh Allen. But it bounced up in the air, and his receiver made a miraculous it was like catching a punt over his shoulder. And he
I was going to say like an alley-oop.
So, when you factor all those things into it, I guess, yeah, you'd rather play the Bills. So I don't think it could have gone any better for the Steelers this past week outside of the TJ Watt injury.
Yeah, and TJ Watt should be Defensive Player of the Year. I'm tired of hearing the Myles Garrett crap. TJ Watt leading the league with 19 sacks on the season.
Who's his primary competition? Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons?
I believe so, because even despite like Trey Hendrickson being up here on the list, Josh Allen, Khalil Mack, Danielle Hunter, Max Crosby. Oh, there's Myles Garrett's name. He's somewhere down here with just 14. And I know he was sitting or whatever. I've got some interesting thoughts about some of this too.
The Browns would be at home right now if not for Joe Flacco, not Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
So I think if you're talking MVP, most valuable player, that should eliminate Myles Garrett because he's had a very, very quiet past 4 or 5 weeks of the season. It's been the Joe Flacco show there in Cleveland, not the Myles Garrett show.
Yeah.
Whereas in Pittsburgh, TJ Watt is responsible for a lot of the Steelers' success up until the final game. You can't say the same for Myles Garrett. The Cowboys, I'll admit, whenever they're on, I watch, but I'm not like as locked in on evaluating them as I am the Steelers and the Browns. I know Micah Parsons is a hell of a player, and he moves around the whole defense, and he's viewed as like a generational talent. But you could say the same thing about Dallas as you do the Browns. It's more so their offense that got them in the position that they are in. The Dallas offense has been gangbusters all year long. CeeDee Lamb's been on a tear. Dak Prescott's had his best season. So if you're talking MVP, TJ Watt.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the TJ Watt camp. And here's some more reasons why. Let's see. You got TJ's got 2 more tackles for loss. He has 8 passes defense to Garrett's 2. He has an interception. He has 4 forced fumbles, and 3 of those recovered, 1 for a touchdown. Where Garrett has 4 forced fumbles, but only the 1 recovered. So it's about the only area he's still in I'd say competition there. Solo tackle wise, Garrett has 33 solo tackles to TJ Watt's 48. And of course, only 14 sacks to 19, 17 tackles for loss. whereas Watt has 19. I love that Dale Lawley's been jumping on this too, because he goes, what is pass rush win rate? It's like, who determines this? You know, there is a statistic that's used for defensive players, and it's called sacks. You know, but that's just that's only like one part of it, though, right? I think I saw that Garrett. I'm going to double check this so I'm not wrong, but I did compile something else that's very shocking, very telling about Myles Garrett and his play through the later part of the season. And I was going to do the last 8 games. I only did 4, but for this particular season so far, he's only had 1 sack since the game they played against the Steelers. That was on November 19th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight games without a sack, and then he had 1 sack against the Jets and whatever hapless bum they put out there to play as quarterback with their porous offensive line. I'm going to hear how he gets held, how he gets double teamed. Yeah, TJ Watt does too. The thing is too, I really want to see this. I might be talking out my ass, I don't know. But when I used to do these type of things, yeah, they do play sort of 2 different positions. They're both edge rushers. One's a defensive end. One guy's hand is in the dirt. One guy's standing up. I get that. But TJ will drop back into pass coverage a hell of a lot more than Myles Garrett will. So he doesn't always have the same number of opportunities to just, get after the quarterback. Just that's all like Khalil Mack ever does. Get after the quarterback. You know what I mean? That used to be the knock I used to have when everybody was against Bud Dupree. I was like, Bud Dupree's dropping back like 25% of the time in Keith Butler's defense. So here's my telling statistic of Myles Garrett. Okay, 28 games. So these guys both entered the league at the same time, right? 2017.
Yeah.
Myles Garrett, number 1 overall, TJ 29th or something, 30th, something like that, right? I didn't do any games where, TJ or Myles were inactive. Myles was suspended in 2019. Guys sit like Myles Garrett sat yesterday. TJ Watt has sat before in the past, So you have Myles Garrett, last 4 games of the year, just the last 4 that they were active in any season. Over that is 28 games. TJ Watt has 25.5 sacks in those 28 games. Myles Garrett has 12.5.
Not even half.
This just disappears. And I'm going to maybe even put money on it. If I bump this out to 8 games, that number is going to look a lot like this is almost like 1 every other game, or not even, right? 12.5. Where TJ's almost 1 in every game. It's 12.5. That would be, if you doubled that up, that'd be 25 games. That's 28 games. Yeah. I think that percentage even drops further if I were to put the microscope on Myles Garrett there. So kind of putting a lot of things in here. We want TJ to be Defensive Player of the Year, at least as a consolation prize if he doesn't get to play in the playoffs. I know he's got to be like just totally pissed off at this injury. And it's not new. This is why Baltimore sat their players. It's sloppy conditions. People are getting hurt, flying around. So the actual game itself. Give me a second here. I need something to drink, brother. What do you think about Myles Garrett in this whole argument?
I think those numbers are really telling because a lot of the people that want to discredit TJ Watt or act like he isn't as good as his numbers say they are. Yeah, there are times where TJ Watt gets hustle sacks, meaning the quarterback runs around back there and TJ Watt chases him down over time and gets the sack number. Doesn't always win with like the sexiest pass rush move. Sometimes he wins with effort in his motor. But those arguments, they're all so baseless to me because at the end of the day, he's still getting the sack. And you want to talk about how he drops back in coverage way more than Myles Garrett. So ipso facto, TJ Watt has way less opportunity to get these sack numbers, and he still towers over Myles Garrett in the sack department. So the people that want to discredit them or call them not real sacks or not as impressive as the pass rush win rate, well, at the end of the day, what are you playing for? Results and wins, sacks. TJ Watt has that. I think this is another part of it. I think if Myles Garrett wasn't on the Browns, you might not have so much of this Myles Garrett, TJ Watt discourse, so many of these arguments. It's because they are forever linked, not only because of their draft class, because they're viewed as 2 of their franchises right now best players, but over the history of their franchise, some of the best players in franchise history. not only the best players right now. So if Myles Garrett played for like the Cardinals or the Cowboys or the Chargers, I don't think it would come up this often. But because you got him in the Browns fan base and you got TJ Watt in the Steelers fan base, this argument will never cease. But to a sane person, it's pretty clear TJ Watt is the better all around football player of the two. Myles Garrett is a physical freak. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's super, super, super good. You can say all that while also admitting TJ Watt is the better all around player.
Yeah, absolutely. But Garrett doesn't lead like in any of these metrics. Like, give it to Max Crosby or somebody. Like, you know what I mean? I don't.
If Max Crosby and Myles Garrett like switched places, people would argue about Crosby and TJ Watt the way they argue about Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. I really do think it's like heavily influenced on the fact that they're division rivals. You don't have anybody else like that. Like the rest of the elite edge rushers are Max Crosby, Nick Bosa, Micah Parsons. Like they don't intertwine as much as TJ Watt and Myles Garrett do.
Yeah, totally. And one other thing I was going to try and bring up here as soon as I get it, the regular season meetings between the Ravens and the Steelers have been fairly one-sided, to be completely honest. I was actually kind of surprised to see this myself.
We're 7-1, right?
Over the last 14, the Steelers are 10-4. And if you go and look at some of those games in 2019, that loss, both of those losses, one of those is Duck Hodges throwing 3 picks. That was the later one on December 29th, that 28-10 loss. 26-23 is the one where Mason got like his head taken off and they had to remove his face mask. And he gets knocked out and Juju ends up fumbling, gets the ball punched out by Marlon Humphrey. Otherwise, like you got at least one of those there was winnable. They're very close games. 16-14 back in 2022. So last year, they're very, very close games. And that first meeting too, Kenny Pickett ends up getting knocked out and Mitch had to play too. That's just, I understand some of these. Baltimore was probably playing, not playing Lamar Jackson on a couple of these also, but you're handicapped anytime you're playing Mitch Trubisky as your quarterback. That kind of goes back around to, Mason Rudolph. And why was Mitch Trubisky playing first? And what's the status of Kenny Pickett? I know you're going to have a lot to say about this for the offseason. We get some bonus football before we actually have to dig into some of these topics. Mike Tomlin, his coaching job, it comes full circle. He has to make a tough decision here because, he has to answer. He's got a general manager. He's got ownership to answer to, and you are paying a quarterback. What's Mitch making these days? Around 10. He was going to make $10 million this year, and they extended
Too much. I don't know what it is. Yeah. It can be $20 per hour. Too much.
Yeah. So why are you not playing the guy that we're paying all this money to? So some of the business end of this, some of the political end of this. The second thing is like, do you call the same plays for Mason Rudolph that you call for Mitch Trubisky? A large portion of the playbook, yeah. I mean, all the run plays, half of the half of what you're going to put in the game plan probably doesn't change at all. You tried to run Mason on a bootleg. One worked, one didn't. Like Connor Hayward was out there. Leaks out. Mitch's cap number dropped from 10 to 6 for 2023. He's still one of the higher paid people that are out there as far as backups. Next year, he's got 7.5 at 8.3. If they end up letting him go, they'll eat about, what did I say, about $7 million, and they'll save about $9 million. You could almost
worth it. 9's more than 7. Do it yesterday. Do it now. Give that money to Mason.
Yes, and so then there's all the talk. Kenny Pickett, he loses his job to injury. And it's really hard to evaluate what Kenny might have done in this same spot. But, man, Mason Rudolph, I've been a Mason Rudolph truther forever.
Oh, yeah.
And is that light? Is that stating it lightly? I
mean, man, I almost never got on the show.
Yeah. I mean, I feel really good for him. Like, I almost feel like I'm like watching a movie and I want to like shed some tears because I just feel like at the post games and you just see like He knows at any week this could be over. It's the not for long league, right? But he protected the football. I understand that, it wasn't pretty. The conditions were bad. We just talked about the guys that were putting the ball on the ground. So did Baltimore. You had Gus Edwards put the ball on the ground. You had Melvin Gordon put the ball on the ground. I mean, it was just sloppy conditions. So I'm not really trying to hold that, but there's still people that are going to be naysayers. They're still not sure if he could be a full season starter. But right now, like, Mike Tomlin had to make this decision we have to shut this down and we have to completely change this and turn this around quick. You got to understand that Mason's running scout teams. It's basically imitating whoever the upcoming opponent's going to be. He's not running the Steelers offense in practices. And when they do get some reps, he was talking about, you're just taking some mental ones because Kenny's going to take, let's say there's 10 snaps or 10 reps for whatever given thing that they're doing in practice. And Kenny's probably taking like 7 or 8 of those, and Mitch might get like 2. And there's none left for Mason, or Mason gets like 1. Yep. And when he's getting those, he's throwing the ball to guys that are, on the practice squad or something too. He's not throwing necessarily to Deontay Johnson so it's just incredible to see how in sync and how in charge of all of this he is. Because even Brian said this on like the last show. I'm expecting okay, it can't be worse than Mitch Trubisky. Walking around yesterday, bumping into a lot of Steelers fans, asking me my opinion. And, they said, we were spoiled. One guy says, we're spoiled with Big Ben. We're expecting Mason to be Ben Roethlisberger. He's not Ben Roethlisberger. Nobody's Ben Roethlisberger. But we'd also overlooked a lot of things with Ben. Ben was maybe he would throw 2 touchdowns. He would have the games where he threw a lot, but you mentioned at the beginning, when they went to Kansas City, they had no offense. They sucked. They were still trying to figure out, they had no identity. And it looks like they have identity now. Najee Harris needs to be given credit alongside this resurgence with Mason being able to push the ball downfield, being able to not turn the ball over. Mason.
The run game's been incredible. The run game's been, I say this without hyperbole. I think we have the best 1-2 punch in the NFL. Thunder and lightning, smash and dash. What Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris have done these past few weeks cannot be understated. It is all related, though, because the fact that Mason's able to push the ball down the field on a consistent basis with confidence and keep the defense honest only helps the running game, because as a result, you have to plan for the quarterback, play action, throwing the ball deep. The boxes are lighter. And I know this was a Mike Tomlin love fest at the beginning of the show. I will say this to critique Tomlin, and I'm going to stick with this. Throughout training camp this year, Mason Rudolph was arguably the best quarterback of camp. Now, you heard that through reports, saw that yourself in person at practice, during team reps, during one-on-ones. Mason looked like you could at least argue that he was the best quarterback of camp. Now, there's no way they're going to come out and start him over Kenny Pickett in Kenny Pickett's second year being a first-round pick. Also, because Kenny didn't really have a bad camp. He had a good preseason, so no reason to make that extreme of a choice in year 2 of Kenny Pickett. However, Mitch Trubisky lost his job last year. He came in and played decent against the Panthers when we needed a win and Kenny was concussed. But when you're in a position like Mike Tomlin is, and you have as much control and as much say with the roster construction, and you're close with the Rooneys and Omar Khan, you're a very close-knit, tight group. Why was there not a conversation about, guys, Mason's the best quarterback in camp. Let's get rid of Mitch. Save the money, get rid of Mitch, make Mason the immediate 2 going into the season. And if Mason starts those games against the Cardinals, or Kenny got hurt there, if he comes in for Kenny during the Cardinals game, plays against the Patriots, that could have been 2 more wins. And we wouldn't have been in this stressful situation heading into week 18 of the NFL season. I do think Tomlin, the Rooneys, Omar Khan, all 3 of them, I think they dropped the ball going into this season because it wasn't any secret. I feel like everybody was talking about that one way or another through training camp. Hey, Mason Rudolph's having a really good camp, the best camp of all 3 quarterbacks. So they had their chance there to make a move and make Mason the 2 going into the season, which would have potentially made them look bad about Mitch Trubisky and giving him that contract. But flip side of it, you actually would have saved some face, because you're going to be hard-pressed to find people in this town who would have stood on the table for Mitch to remain on the roster. Sometimes you just got to take your lumps, take your loss, eat the money, and move on. So that's a mistake they made, I believe, firmly, is that they could have fixed this a little bit earlier and made Mason the 2 from the jump, because we're seeing it live time now. He is seizing his opportunity and playing extremely well. I don't blame Tomlin or whoever is calling the shots now for rolling with Mason last week and for assumingly, probably, hopefully rolling with Mason into the playoffs. He's earned that right. He's playing as good as you could ask Mason Rudolph to play. He's playing the best ball of his career. That's another thing. I am very happy for people like you and other Mason Rudolph fans who never gave up on the kid. But I look at it like a comedian nowadays, where he'll have like a joke of his dug up or something he said dug up from like 2010, 2009, and people want him to apologize for it because it's just like offensive now or not viewed as funny. Mason Rudolph is my version of like 2010 comedy, where when I didn't like Mason Rudolph and I thought he sucked, it's because he wasn't good. If I can admit that he's gotten better, I feel like the supporters and the people who never gave up on him should also be willing to admit he's gotten better. Like, I can sit here with a straight face, I'm smiling, but I can sit here and tell you I am standing on the fact that I did not think he was good when he was younger. He went through shit, but there was a reason why the Steelers didn't retain him. He came back. People forget that, but he left and came back this past year. He is better now, and I can totally admit that. Like, he gives us the best chance to win right now. I wouldn't take him out if I was calling the shots. I love the confidence he's playing with. His arm is still there, very strong arm. He's got good chemistry with the receivers. He gives George Pickens the chances that he begs for. It keeps him happy. Deontay loves him. It's a win-win scenario right now to stick with Mason Rudolph, because if you go to Kenny Pickett and he doesn't perform well, not only does that look bad for Tomlin and the Steelers as a whole, but if Kenny Pickett's time isn't done in Pittsburgh now, it would for sure be done if he started a playoff game and stunk up the joint. This way, say Mason plays and we win a game and we lose the next game, you can at least go into next season, if you want to, telling yourself, okay, it's going to be a competition between Kenny and Mason if he's re-signed and whoever else they bring in. If they go to Kenny and he blows it, that's it for Kenny. If they start Mason and he struggles to a point where the Steelers are still alive and they can put Kenny in, he can save the day, great. But if it never comes to that, it never comes to that. You know, the ball is, I find it perfect that Tomlin uses the phrase, the ball's in Mason's hands, because the ball is completely out of Kenny Pickett's hands right now. He just has to do what's asked of him as a 2 and sit patiently. I don't think his time in Pittsburgh is done because he's under contract. But right now, as we sit here in 2024, the year of our Lord, and the Steelers are the 7th seed of the playoffs,
yes,
Mason Rudolph is the quarterback.
Yeah.
He earned it.
Yeah, absolutely, he earned it. You can't, how do you go away and play a guy who hasn't played since that Cardinals game, like a month of football? You can't.
You're setting him up for failure.
And it's not like he has the track record of experience that, you know, Mason went out there and our first game was a 2-touchdown game. He threw a touchdown in a sloppy environment. How about the quick slant, by the way? And
they love that, dude. They love that. They've hit that like 4 times this year. That deep. I struggle calling it a post because it's so like flat, but it's so deep down the field. It's like a really, really deep slant. But yeah. Pickens has scored on it 3 times, twice. Deontay scored on it. So yeah, it's an effective route for them.
Did I see that the Steelers have the most touchdown plays of 70+ yards with like 5 of them? And I think Mason is accounted for 3, maybe
in the past like few weeks. I think the Dolphins, there was a stat just last night that they led the NFL in like, what was it, over 60-yard touchdown plays the Dolphins do?
Yeah.
Maybe it was
it's cherry picked, of course, but
yeah.
And Mason's had 3 starts, and he had the same amount of starts with a 110+ passer rating as Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert.
I saw this.
Yeah, that was
numbers don't lie. That's a good stat.
That is some very good company to be, lumped in with their NFL on CBS.
Is Mason Rudolph too good now? Is he playing himself out of Pittsburgh?
Now, there's something interesting that I don't know if I want to touch on that with this show. It's hard to speculate. Let's see what happens. He got them to the postseason. And since he got them there, and this offense looks completely different. Now, with one game, Kenny had the offense looking different, and then Mitch Trubisky had them looking entirely different. The
I'm
one
glad
thing I
you
will,
brought that up, Joe, because I think people are very, very, very quick to dismiss the last and only full game Kenny Pickett played without Matt Canada. We
correct.
all were whistling Winn-Dixie out of our assholes when Kenny Pickett beat the Bengals without Matt Canada, and the Steelers finally eclipsed 400 yards of offense. Pat Freiermuth went over 100 yards. We're using the middle of the field. Would have had a touchdown on top of that if Deontay didn't drop it in the end zone. And then the next 2 weeks, Mitch sucks. And I think it all kind of got blended together. And yeah, it's only one good game, but the last chance Kenny got, he played good. So it's a shame that it's gone down like this for him. But for the betterment of the Steelers, if you're a fan, you can't scoff at it or be upset, because Mason's put us in a spot now where we're alive and we're in the playoffs. And
Yeah.
as alluded to, I feel actually good about this offense at times.
Yeah, no, he's made George Pickens look like Randy Moss. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, and Mason's been in the same spot where he lost his, you know, he lost some time to injury. He did come back. Then he had the whole Myles Garrett incident, and then Duck starts winning some games. He comes in and he loses his job. He's been in the same exact spot before.
And then Mason comes in for Duck, plays well, gives us a spark against the Jets, and breaks his collarbone. Yeah, there are parallels there to what's going on with Kenny right now and what happened to Mason in the beginning of his career, because that's one thing as a Mason. I won't call myself a Mason hater anymore, but like when I was a Mason hater, I was even quick to mention, listen, that Ravens game he got knocked out in, the hit from Earl Thomas, he was 10 of 10 leading up to that. Like he was dicing him up in that game. And then that really derailed his 2019 season to a point where we didn't see him play good again until that Jets game in which he broke his collarbone.
Yeah.
So sometimes the NFL is not a fair league. Sometimes things aren't fair. And especially when you're not a first-round pick. And as we're seeing right now, even with Kenny being a first-round pick, the NFL is not about fairness. And Tomlin's always said you won't lose your job to injury. But when you're playing as good as a guy is right now, as in as good as Mason is, you have to accept the hand you're dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Kenny's gonna have to do. I was kind of like hinting at a few weeks ago, like we thought Kenny might come back a game earlier. I'm gonna try and wrap up a few of the things that you were talking about all together with this. So one was Mike Tomlin being stubborn. Yeah, I don't know. The Patriots come into town. The defense kind of laid an egg, let Bailey Zappi just have their way. I know that Trubisky was really bad in that game. That may or may not have gone differently. Same difference if like, so Mason's an emergency quarterback, so he wouldn't have he couldn't come in unless Trubisky was hurt when it came to that Cardinals game. Okay. But the Colts game, like they weren't like behind. They weren't like, and all of a sudden you see it start to slip away. At halftime or after that first drive in the third quarter, I think they make that change and they could win that game. That defense was just left out there, you know, and it's not the full defense. They're just left out there, hang out to dry, right?
Yeah.
So I think that would have eased things. They would have got to 11, or where's the record at now? 10 wins. They could have got to 11 wins. They would have had this clinched a lot sooner. And then what? Maybe they could maybe they're in a tiebreaker situation with the Browns. They go to Houston. They're able to play in a dome instead of one of these, you know, crap weather towns like KC or Buffalo. Miami, of course, would have been a nice destination. Though that kind of went a little different. Some other things from this same game, though. Mason, 18 of 20 in this slop, 90% completed passes. That's like ridiculous. He had the one that was the bad throw that was nearly picked, and I'm trying to think what the other one was. There was one that was like maybe a little overthrown? He went deep for Deontay, maybe?
Oh, yeah. I got, dude. Okay, so on Twitter, I mentioned that play, and I was as like neutral as I could possibly be. It was a 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, and Mason threw it deep to Deontay, George Pickens style, hoping to get the deep shot. A little in front of him. Doesn't touch Deontay's hands or anything. I mentioned on Twitter, I'm like, I don't hate the call there. I like the confidence. It was there, one-on-one coverage, good time in the game to do it. You'd like a better ball, but not too bad. My comments, it's Deontay's fault. I need what better ball. It's a good throwing ball. I'm like, dude, everybody, okay. No more Mason critiques from me. I won't say anything else about the Prince who's promised. Even though I didn't say a word about the almost interception on the first drive. I let that sit. And then when he hucks it down to Deontay Johnson incomplete, I say, oh, he won a better ball there, maybe. I got roasted on Twitter for even entertaining the fact that Mason didn't do the right thing there. So, yeah, that wasn't like the perfect pass, but it could have been a little bit better. But what people were arguing with me was that they thought Deontay either lost it or gave up on the play, which is plausible. So I'm not really looking to argue further about it, especially because he finished 18 of 20. Like he played a great game.
Yeah, I agree. And he's been playing, like I said, he's 3 games. I know 17 points and slop wasn't a whole lot there, but 34 and 30. And 30 could have been more if Najee doesn't slide short of the goal line as well, just to kill.
What was this last week?
From last week, yeah.
Yeah,
last week's game, they could have scored even more. This one, of course, no. They played this pretty much to perfection, chewing the clock. The coaching is in sync. I'm liking what's going on with Eddie Faulkner and Mike Silva, and you could tell that they actually tailored this game plan to try and, work with what works best for Mason Rudolph. You could tell, like, from these touchdown plays that they've tweaked some things in the playbook. You can't overhaul the whole thing.
It reminds me of the Super Bowl 40 offense with young Ben. Like, he's really good at play action, good at attacking the middle of the field and going deep when the defense allows it. The run game is phenomenal. It's very similar, I believe, to the early days of Big Ben Steeler offenses, where we're not asking Mason to throw it 30, 40 times a game, just enough to take what the defense gives you, take some shots, protect the ball. But the offense primarily is running through Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, and at a perfect time, because you just mentioned going to play a playoff game in poor weather conditions, probably, maybe not a downpour like versus Baltimore, but Buffalo is probably going to be cold and snowy. And what a better time to have arguably the best rushing attack in the NFL. The Steelers have found their footing, pun intended, at a perfect time, because I think the formula to beat the Bills is right there in front of their face. Keep doing what you've been doing these past 3 weeks. Don't change it up. Don't get cute. Don't ask Mason to go out there and win it for you. Do what you've been doing these past 3-4 weeks, and you give the Steelers a really good shot to win, because the Bills also aren't very good against the run. So it's like perfect for what's going on right now in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they're missing some guys. They've been missing throughout the year. They've had to go through their own attrition. As you said, Josh Allen is good for a few picks here or there. He reminds you so much of Ben Roethlisberger in those ways, not only from extending plays, but just slinging around the field. And whoever ends up,
I've always said that.
Whoever ends up with the ball, whatever, more often than not, it's going to be, the guys wearing the same color uniform, but not always. So that's very true. The running game, as you alluded to, Najee Harris finishes over the century mark with 1,035 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground, no touchdowns receiving. Nor did Jaylen Warren, which is actually kind of surprising from the year before. But Warren did add to his 784 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns with, 370 yards receiving off of 61 receptions, believe it or not, which puts him in line to be second on the team. Now, here's, you talk about numbers. 61 receptions on the year. Second to George Pickens, who had 63. Jaylen Warren has 370 yards receiving. George Pickens has 1,140. So a lot different, the chain moving. Deontay ends with 51 for 717, so he's second in yardage. And you got a lot of guys with some loose change found in the couch, such as Allen Robinson, Pat Freiermuth, who dealt with injuries throughout the year, Connor Hayward, and Calvin Austin actually surprisingly ends up with 17 catches, 180 yards, has found himself as a little gadget player. Good playing on special teams. He had a nice return. Godwin Igwebuike, I'm actually going to say his name and try and say it right, deserves all the recognition in the world for one of the more heads-up plays I've ever seen, because this ball is rolling. You're like, okay, Justin Tucker, did he just screw up? Is this going to roll out of bounds for a penalty and you get the ball out to the 40? And all of a sudden it's Godwin, not Gunner, Godwin. What you doing, buddy? He slows down, puts his feet out of bounds, lays out, stretches, and then touches the ball. And it was like, that was absolutely beautiful. Either Danny Smith and or Godwin, both of you like deserve like a game ball for that. Cause that was awesome.
Smartest thing I've ever seen on a football field. Like the smartest thing. The ball gets down near the out of bounds line. I'm saying to myself, grab it, do something with it. Don't let, because I was starting to worry about the Ravens running down and grabbing it because it's a live ball. Like it was taking that long. It felt like an eternity that the ball was sitting there on the television screen. Then he slides out of bounds and grabs it. I'm like, what did he just do? It almost explains how Gunnar Olszewski like lost his mind seemingly a couple weeks back, and he did like the toe tap thing.
Oh my God!
I think he was thinking he was going to try to do the out of bounds thing, but he just totally screwed it up. And what you saw from Godwin Igwebuike was that just an incredible display of football intelligence and high football IQ. I don't know who to assign the credit or who to give the flowers to, if Danny Smith actually goes over that kind of thing, or if Igwebuike just knew that and remembered from his prior times being a return guy. But to put your team on the 40-yard line in those conditions and that important of a game, can't say enough about it.
Yeah, well, I will say enough about Presley Harvin. First punt, 34 yards, only to the Ravens 19. And then you have Stout with the Ravens, who kicks 64 yards right after that. It's like, why can't we have nice things? And I know we've even talked about it, and we've said, well, they keep Harvard around because he's the holder, and I think he saved that one field goal at the end that iced the game. That didn't look like the best snap.
A little bad, right? Yeah, a little fumble there.
Yeah, so it is, as I'm, crapping on him, I will give him, his roses for that as well. A 49-yard punt, so he like redeems himself the next time. That goes to Baltimore 7. And then let's see. But then I just keep seeing like, okay, Stout punts one, it's 59 yards. That one ended up as a touchback. Then Harvin finally gets a 52-yard punt. That goes to the 29 because it went from the Steelers 19 to the 29. Okay, that's good. Back him up some. Get into the second half. You had Calvin Austin, like, it said he muffed it actually on this one. This was the one he kind of he was playing around with it on the ground and then ended up taking it 21 yards anyways. But that was a 56-yard punt from the opposition. 39-yard punt from Harvin, only to the 21. Like, he has a hard time like pinning people in. Stout hits one 57 yards. Harvin hits a 46-yarder to the 18. Okay, that one was a good one. So like 1 out of 3, you know what I mean? Stout hits 140 and ends up in the Steelers 11. The field position game was a battle. And this is when you switched over to the fourth quarter and they said, dry ball. Guys are kind of resting on their laurels. 3rd and 4 on the 29. Maybe they'll just run it up the middle and go for a field goal or something here. To make it like 10-7, and it goes 14-7 with Mason Rudolph finding Deontay Johnson 71. Oh, I'm sorry. It was on the Steelers 29. My bad. You know what I mean? Get conservative, right? Not go all the way for the jugular. Stout had one that was 40, goes to the Steelers 9. It's like, okay, Presley Harvin kicks 153, touchback. He just couldn't catch a break. And
clear difference in the two players is what we're getting at here.
Very much so, and that was it. And that's kind of been a consistent. It worries me because of the postseason, and I know they're not going to make any kind of change now unless there was an injury with Harvin. But it's just something where you need consistent play out of him if you're going to have to rely on. All these teams qualified. You're playing playoff teams now. This isn't the time to figure it out. So it's good that, Mason's come along. Mason hasn't looked completely bad because they'd be out of it. And that's kind of to your point. Does he earn next year? Does he come back? Do they sign him? He got to get that Trubisky money to him. Yeah. You still got a guy under a rookie first-round pick deal with Pickett. So, and then I'm not completely like, the parallels there, stop and go with his career. I'm not completely out on him. But for right now, you roll with the guy who got you there. Mason does terrible here. He might not have a job if he let's say they get the doors blown off him. He throws 3 picks, no touchdowns, and it just looks bad. Then there's going to be a different perception about that heading into the off season.
Yeah.
But I think if you had both of these guys in an ideal situation, you have, win or lose, Mason plays a respectable game.
Yeah.
And he got you there. They played 3 of these games on the road to begin with. If he wins another one on the road in another hostile environment, that's going to be insane. And then you really have a conversation. But you can but you can bring these guys to battle, because my comment, like I said, as I was walking around and talking with people, why not? You still have, Kenny's only going to be a third-year guy. He's watching Rudolph now, and maybe this is a better, light bulbs going off. You know what I mean? Stay in the pocket. Look here, not there, kind of thing. A different learning experience where Mason got to be under the learning tree of Ben Roethlisberger. But if both those guys stink next year and you're absolutely pissed off as a Ginzer, guess what? They'll finally get that coveted top 10 draft pick that everybody wants in order to get the 4th best quarterback probably available in the draft at that point.
You want to get Arch Manning, start tanking now, brother. I mean, I'm in favor of that entirely. I've been saying since Mason's second start this year that he won, I've been very much in favor of the idea, get rid of Mitch. We've been on that train. We've been on that train so long, we're sleeping over and spending the night on the train. Get rid of Mitch. Try like hell to re-sign Mason Rudolph. And I don't know how those conversations are going to go if they have to tell him, hey, we're going to call it a competition, but we're going into it with you having the leg up because you finished the year, you've played the best this year, you've earned the right to be the pseudo QB1. But you got to let Kenny compete. He's on the team next year, whether or not you believe in him or not. So you got Mason, you got Kenny, and that third guy, not Mitch, I'm thinking they'll either sign a guy like Jacoby Brissett, maybe Gardner Minshew, or they draft a guy. Now, not in the first round. That'd be crazy. I know there's some fans that want that to be the case, but with where the Steelers are going to pick, you're talking about maybe lucking into a guy like Bo Nix, who is the same thing as Kenny Pickett. He's 24 years old, only had one really good season. That would just be the same exact scenario. They're not going to get Caleb Williams or Drake May, probably not Michael Penix Jr. either. So my ideal / most realistic QB room for next year, I know we're way ahead of ourselves, but I'm thinking it'll be Mason, Kenny, and then either a journeyman who can compete / start / push the two of them to compete, as in Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, or they get somebody in the 3rd or 4th round with a live arm who can come in and provide some kind of competition. If they take a guy in the 1st round, I will be flabbergasted surprised. There's a 0% chance they go 1st round quarterback unless it's just Kenny that they're able to retain because he's the only guy left. I would be shell-shocked if they went 1st round quarterback. So Mason and Kenny, very good chance of being here next year, I think, unless Mason, for whatever reason, gets offered a huge contract and wants to spite the Steelers. So you got those two, and then either a journeyman or a mid-round draft pick.
You got to wonder, money or glory. Now, Mason was making $4 million a year before. He's not making that same ballpark money this season as a QB3. And in fact, he signed on the dotted line a day or two before Mitch came back. He was probably thinking, hey, I'm going to come in and maybe be the backup. And if the kid in front of me doesn't, do so hot, blah, blah, blah. Mason's younger than Mitch Trubisky. I think Mitch is 29, Mason's 28, and Kenny is 26. There's about almost 3 years difference separating between Kenny and Mason. Kenny played 5 years in college, which is a good point, with the large season with the 42 touchdowns. I mean, still, though, when you don't have to give up anything but your 1st round pick for a guy who broke Dan Marino's record, give it a shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People are
we needed a quarterback, too. It wasn't like they just did it willy-nilly. We needed a quarterback.
He's not Zach Wilson. He's not turning the ball over, but he's not throwing touchdowns either. And it's the reason why you still... Mason did a very good job of just lighting up the Bengals and saying pretty much, I'm going to make you really doubt as to whether or not you should put me on the bench for the next week. And then he came back out and did the same thing against Seattle. And now he went and got them into the postseason. And it's the whole complexion of the offense has completely changed. I know we're a broken record on it, but you see, even George Pickens, his involvement in this game was Baltimore was going to take him away. And I said, yeah, so what?
Yeah.
We could go somewhere else. It's not like Mason's locked into like spreading the ball around the 7, 8 different guys. He's not that kind of quarterback, at least not yet. But the few that, they try and take away one, and that strategy has not been working. You try and shut down the run or creep up, that strategy has not been working. And that's something that's been working. And that's why I said, let Kenny kind of sit and learn. You don't know what the offensive coordinator situation is going to be. I think he's already been tarnished with Matt Canada and the way things have went this year, and the offensive line is actually playing a little bit better. I mean, Dan Moore, one of those sacks in this game was still 100% on him, but you're going to have that against Baltimore, and they're sending blitzes and guys are coming free. But, Mason's standing in there, standing tall, trying to make those plays. It's really respectable. And like I said, guys could joke all we want, When I used to joke about Landry Jones, that was a completely different kind of joking. I never had any grand illusions that Landry should ever start games in the NFL. I'm about halfway when it comes to like Mason. And it's like there's enough doubt in my head that he could grow to be a solid guy. I never had any doubts that he was capable. I always saw it that same way that, yeah, he's not Ben, but this guy isn't out here like you see pick somebody that's backed up for the Patriots that never panned out, like a Ryan Mallett or somebody like that, or even Brock Osweiler for that matter, somebody like that. I was like, yeah, he's like, Mason's not out there like Zach Wilsoning it up. Here's what I don't want to see for next year. I know we're getting ahead of it, but this is like where I'll leave it. Jacoby Brissett as a Q. I don't think he's going to sign as a QB3, but he'd be cheap and in that area. More teams will probably be looking at this due to the emergency quarterback rule that they'll have guys like that. It's going to end up being probably like that Chris Oladokun type thing where they draft somebody like later, or another Landry Jones, maybe draft somebody in a 4th round or whatever that just becomes your development guy. It's like a Skylar Thompson in Miami or somebody along those lines is where I really see it. Dorian Thompson-Robinson over in Cleveland. That makes more sense to me than trying to get, if you bring Mason back and you have Kenny and they're fighting, they're going to be like 1A, 1B. The other guy's got to be a clear 3. You don't bring in like Jameis Winston, for example, because that just muddies the waters. Everybody's going to be doing the same thing, crying, hooting, and hollering about.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Guy.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, I don't want that kind of competition. I just want a 2-horse race.
2-horse.
That's it. Like you saw what happened with the 3-headed monster, and then he went with the guy that had the most experience. He had the more draft pedigree, and it didn't do them any favors last season. In fact, they were in the same kind of situation where this year they made it. Last year they just barely missed. Like we said, one game out of 250, whatever the hell I said earlier, that they hadn't been in contention. So hell of a job by Mike Tomlin. Now we got to get on the Kyle Brandt train of when does Mason Rudolph get into this comeback player of the year award kind of thing. Screw Joe Flacco. Nobody cares about that guy.
Oh, dude, I'm begging, I'm dreaming, I'm hoping, I'm praying for Browns Steelers AFC Championship game. I don't know if it'll work out like that because of matchups, but I would love nothing more to see Joe Flacco again, dude. Come on, Joe, one last ride. Give us what we want.
You know what? That would happen. You got Buffalo first, wild card round. Your divisional round, Steelers being the lowest or the bottom seed, would have to go to Baltimore for another rematch and play in Baltimore. And strange bedfellows. If they could do it against Buffalo, now these are teams that are Baltimore and Pittsburgh. They know each other, and we've seen the track record that the Steelers have had. I know it's going to be a little different. Odell Beckham doesn't scare me. Zay Flowers does. Roquan Smith does, Marlon Humphrey does, Lamar Jackson does.
Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, and they're going to have Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook doesn't scare me either. If he rips off like some type of LeGarrette Blount with the Patriots years ago, type of playoff run, all the better to him. But right now, I kind of feel like he's washed. But you never know.
So.
You never know with situation and whatnot. But yeah, Minnesota took a pass on that pretty quick, and a team in need. So we shall see. Anyways, we're up against it. And I lost my other train of thought on that. But anyways, it could happen. That game would be in Cleveland. That would be insane.
Nobody but we're the last team Joe wants to see. You know that. We're the ones. He's looking at that playoff grid, and he's like, okay, I can handle the Chiefs. Yeah, all right, the Bills, Dolphins. Don't want to see the Steelers. Like, he still has nightmares of Troy Polamalu, I'm sure. Those colors are still the same, baby.
Yeah, and the winner of that game, Houston, and again, the Browns don't have like an easy like slate there either. Everybody's going to look and say, "Oh, well, they just beat up Houston a couple weeks ago with an asterisk." So Houston didn't have what? They didn't have Will Anderson or C.J. Stroud in that game. So that'll be.
Yeah, the Browns are on a magical ride for sure, just like us in a weird twist of fate. We're both on magical rides here. So, who's going to be the first to fall off the carpet?
I'm sorry, man. Sinuses, this weather, like it could go away anytime soon. I've been very nasally. I apologize to everyone. I've been muting. Zach's been hearing me cough, I think, because I've been trying to mute the mic, and hopefully it didn't pick up too much. So, Zach, it's good to have you back, buddy. I really wish like I was able to do some of the post games immediately after like these Mason wins. These Saturday games have been like just. I kind of like it in one way. I have my Sunday. It's kind of free. It's like, although it wasn't that way really, because I had to watch that Tennessee and Jacksonville game. Like my eyes were glued to that. So, and Steelers fans there were Steelers fans in the stands in Tennessee out in Nashville, terrible towels and all, rooting for the Titans. How awesome is that?
I wouldn't expect any less.
I mean, they go to a game that's totally not even a Steelers game to pull for somebody that needs the win for the Steelers. And the Jaguars, last thought, that is why you don't disrespect the terrible towel. So
we try to tell you.
The curse is real. Yeah.
Try to warn you, buddy. It happens to everybody. That's why I want to see the Browns, because they're the last name on the terrible towels hit list from this year that showed disrespect.
It's coming. And wouldn't that be like the most wild thing in the world? And I'm way putting the cart before the horse. You're saying AFC title game. Steelers go all the way to the Super Bowl. It means they will have won 2 more games and rematches in the AFC North on the way there. And the AFC North itself, they're 5-1. That would be like 7-1, which would be insane. And then the entire division, first in NFL history. I think you got to go back into the 1930s. There was like an NFL West for the first time that every team, like Bengals fans are looking at this and they're like, well, we missed the playoffs, but we won 9 games and we won them with Jake Browning. So they still think there's a foundation. There is a tough division to go 5-1 in when they all, for the first time ever, no one's done this. So
it's the best division in sports.
That's why you still have to give credit to Mike Tomlin and the way that, Kevin Colbert before Omar Khan and the way they've crafted this roster. Hats off to them. My name's Joe. His name's Zach. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. And we'll be back later this week with a little bit of pre-gaming. What on earth is going on? You're like Brian over here.
How'd I do that? You see that?
Yeah.
I made balloons come up.
I don't know.
Weird.
That was Brian tries to always mess around and do crazy stuff like that, so I have no clue. Anyways, I tried to stay away from that. I'm very vanilla with the, you've seen, all of you have seen what our graphics department is capable of, and it's basically that. Which isn't, it's not 100% true because I designed the other stuff that's on here too, but that's all the more time I got for stuff like that. I'm losing my voice. My name's Joe. His name's Zach. Until next time, everyone. We encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.